Welcome to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, and we have, I think, a fascinating discussion that you haven't seen too much from this particular perspective, because in the news we're kind of inundated with a lot of what environmental camps are doing. But what about those who are looking at the effects of that on our society and the impact that we're seeing in the long term? Well, we're happy to have with us Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow of Discovery Institute's Center on Human Exceptionalism, and he's also the author of quite a few books, including A Rat is a Pig, Is a Dog is a Boy, The Human Cost of the Animal Rights Movement, also The Consumer Guide to a Brave New World, and Culture of Death, The Assault on Medical Ethics in America. He also writes a popular human exceptionalism blog at the National Review Online. You might have read that. It's good to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, in the news, we're covering all sorts of stories that have to do with environmentalism and environmental actions that are going on, which I think are quite different from those of conservation efforts, although we haven't really defined the difference between those two. But we're hearing a lot about whether it's the popular topic of global warming or climate change, as it's called now, or whatever. It looks as if you have been looking at this from a bigger scenario about what is really pushing what you see as the environmental movement. Tell us what I'm seeing a theme with a lot of your books. What conclusion have you come up with?
Yeah, you know, when I started doing this kind of work, which was at first against assisted suicide, I hadn't come up with this kind of overarching connecting of the dots understanding. But the more I got involved in things like utilitarian bioethics that seek to create distinctions among the quality of human life in terms of value, animal rights, which has to be distinguished from animal welfare, but animal rights seeks to create a moral equality between humans and animals. And now in the environmental movement, which has not only ceased to be what it once was, which was to promote human thriving in the context of using responsible environmental practices, which of course is something we should do, it's become positively anti-human. How many times these days do you hear, whether it's in global warming advocacy or other kinds of environmental agitation, that humans are the cancer on the planet, we're the AIDS on the planet, we are the ones who are the enemies of the planet. And this becomes a very disturbing thing. It's not a healthy approach. Let me give you just an example.
Okay.
You've seen, probably, at least certainly my age, we used to go to these sci-fi matinees, and there was a great old science fiction movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And it starred Michael Rennie, and the movie was about an alien who comes down to Earth with his killer robot Gort. The alien's name was Klaatu. Mm-hmm. And Klaatu has come to Earth in 1951, in this version, to save humankind from itself. Because we're developing atomic weapons. This is when the Cold War was starting, potential for nuclear conflagration. And so the alien comes to save human beings from ourselves because we're worth it, right?
Okay.
In the 2008 remake, they have the exact same story of what happens to the alien Klaatu when he comes to Earth, but the mission of the alien is completely different. In the 2008 version, the alien here is here to commit total genocide. That is, to kill each and every human being on the planet to save the Earth. That's a gigantic difference. And spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, we talk Klaatu into not killing us all. And he says, all right, I won't kill you all, but there's going to be a price. And as he leaves the Earth, his spaceship issues a pulse, and we are rendered completely non-technological. That would kill billions of people. The message, and this is A-list Hollywood, Keanu Reeves. The message is that human beings are the enemy. Human beings are the villains. And you're also concomitantly with that seeing agitation for things like nature rights. That is, the rights of nature to be co-equal to those of people. And let me give you an example I have right here of how this is defined. And often, by the way, it's kind of a neo-pagan earth religion. This is from the Constitution of Ecuador. Nature, or Pachamama, Pachamama is the Incan earth goddess, where life is reproduced and exists, has the right to exist, persist, maintain, and regenerate its vital cycle, structure, function, and its processes and evolution. That's a right to life for nature. And the idea for this is that if the rights and they mean it, the rights of nature come into conflict with those of people, then you have to go to court to determine whether nature wins or whether people win. And the chances of court are very high because everybody is entitled to sue to protect the rights of nature. Now, you might say, well, don't worry, Wesley, that's Ecuador. It's a small country. They're not real powerful. It's also in Bolivia. Well, that's also a small country. Well, it's also in 30 cities in the United States, including Pittsburgh, which is closer to you, and Santa Monica, which is closer to me. I grew up in Los Angeles. I know Santa Monica like the back of my hand. There's no nature left in Santa Monica. The reason for making a nature rights declaration is ideological. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, supports nature rights. And it has been, uncoincidentally and not surprisingly, proposed for inclusion in a global warming treaty to fight global warming. And what would this do? This would bring human thriving to a screeching halt because we couldn't make use of the resources that help provide prosperity. So you see in global warming, and this is the anti-human consequence of these kinds of policies, the desire to reduce our prosperity in the name of saving the planet. And what will that mean to the destitute countries such as in Africa that may be very resource rich but haven't been able to really get their act together in terms of creating prosperity because of cultural problems, no rule of law, things of this sort? They would be stifled from actually obtaining the kind of prosperity we enjoy in the West. And that's why you see proposal after proposal to take hundreds of billions of dollars from Western countries, developed countries, transfer that money to underdeveloped or developing countries. But that's just going to turn them into dependency cultures, which isn't a healthy thing either. So what's happened in the last 20, 30 years is an anti-humanism has infected the environmental movement. It is dangerous to our self-perception as unique and important beings of unique dignity and importance. And it is undercutting our ability to provide for humankind in a way that will provide good and decent and healthy lives. So it's very dangerous, I think, and that's why I called the ebook The War on Humans.
Okay. I want to let our audience know that we're talking to Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow with the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, and we're talking about some of the trends that he's seeing. Let me ask you about the motivation behind all of this. You know, if you took a biblical perspective, it says that men and women are supposed to subdue the earth. It's not the other way around. Where is this coming from? You talk about the change in 25 years. Why? Why is this changing?
I think there are a few things at work here. One is I think I call the green movement has turned brown. By that I mean when you mix green and red, you get brown. There is an unnecessary anti-free market ideology that has really entered into environmental activism, which is very, very ironic considering that the most polluting societies in our world today have been and are communist. The Soviet Union was a terrible polluter, and today China is probably the worst polluter on the planet. Secondly, I think there is a desire to destroy Judeo-Christian moral philosophy as the backbone of our civilization. Judeo-Christian moral philosophy, which I'm distinguishing from the faith for the moment, sees the individual human being as having unique dignity. That is the basis of our freedom. That is the basis of our prosperity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the fundamental founding premise, in essence, of Western civilization today. Third, I think there is a desire to destroy Christianity as a faith, because many on the left in particular, but view it as moralistic. And there is I think a desire to marginalize Christian influence within the society.
And that's having such an impact that you're saying that, does everybody within those movements understand how these are all linked together, or are they somewhat drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak?
I would say that that not everybody is sitting around plotting these things as I've described them. I think many in the leadership certainly understand that they want to destroy Judeo-Christian moral philosophy because they don't believe in human exceptionalism. Animal rights activists, and this has to be distinguished from animal welfare, which is a human duty, that is treating animals humanely. But animal rights says that humans and animals have equal moral worth, and they base the ability to have rights on suffering. That is, if you can feel pain, this is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals type people, then you have rights. It's called painiance. And so since a cow can feel pain and a human being can feel pain, a cow and a human are equal, and therefore what you do to the cow is the same as if you did the same thing to the human. Now, that's very destructive. Listen to this. This is from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They had something called the Holocaust on Your Plate campaign, which they tried to convince young people. And by the way, a lot of this is aimed at the young. And there's a reason for that. And I hope your listeners and viewers will talk to their children and ask, what are you being taught about environmentalism? What are you being taught about the place of human beings on the earth? And you might find that your kids are being taught that they're the enemies.
You know, let me, before you go further, let me just ask you this. Do you, this is fascinating. I'd love to take another 15-minute segment with you. Do you have time to do that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Hold on there. I have a lot of questions asked, and I know that you have more to let us know about it. I'll mention that we're talking to Wesley Smith, Senior Fellow of the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, and we're going to be back talking more about how the environmental movement may have changed totally from its emphasis a couple decades ago. It's coming up here on Focus Today in our next segment.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson here with you, and we're talking with Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow of the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, and we're talking about the environmental movement in broad terms and how it has changed, getting into more specifics to all of this. And is there really a war on humans? Save the earth at all cost, and do not consider the aspect of the humans who are, according to a biblical premise anyway, supposed to be the ones in charge and, as it says in the Bible, to subdue the earth. I appreciate you staying on with us for another segment here. I want to ask you a little bit, if we have this environmental movement, if I can summarize it, that has changed from what it had been to now more of an activist view against humans and saying we have to have laws that provide for nature as opposed to the humans who live on planet Earth. Normally we have a point-counterpoint to issues. Is there any kind of opposition to this particular trend you're seeing, or is it so fragmented that some of these laws, as you mentioned, can be just enacted in countries and cities and steamroll over any other views that capitalistic society might have?
You know, one of the things that I see happening in the environmental issue, particularly around the global warming controversy, is the idea that there's not allowed to be a give and take. There's not allowed to be a point and counterpoint. How many times have we been told in the global warming controversy that it's a fact, that there's no debate, that it must be done? And in fact, the LA Times has gotten to the place where they have announced that they will refuse to print letters to the editor that question the reality of human-caused global warming.
Wow.
So you have a real tinge of authoritarianism moving into this field. One of the things I point out in the War on Humans is that you've got a lot of mainstream environmentalists now extolling China as the model. One of the things that many in this movement want to do is have radical depopulation, human depopulation. Well, and then they look at China's one-child policy as having been the right approach. But look what that's involved: forced abortion, female infanticide, eugenics, a terrible tyranny, babies ripped out of their mothers' bodies against the mother's will. And yet these good, genteel, quote, liberals say, well, this is the good way to go. But take a look at the results of the China policy. They have not reduced the number of Chinese people in their country. They have slowed the rate of growth of population. Imagine what it would take to just even reduce the human population by 10%, the kind of draconian, deadly policies. Now, a lot of these people would never support those kinds of policies, but that's the only way they're going to get from here to there based on what they say they want. And you've got a lot of very radical kind of crazy people like the Unabomber who pick up this kind of thinking and may do things that are very untoward. Well, and again, I'm sorry?
Well, I was just going to say, if we have then a group that is able to effectively get legislation passed, you mentioned in Ecuador and Bolivia and other cities.
30 cities in this country,
right,
and potentially in the United Nations Treaty on Global Warming.
Is there any stopping this for people who are opposed to it? Because it sounds like it's kind of being steamrolled through.
Well, part of the reason it's being steamrolled through is that people are not aware of the distinct anti-humanism that this way comes, which is why I'm doing the work I'm doing, not only in terms of the ebook, but the Discovery Institute with whom I work, and I'm a senior fellow there, as you mentioned. They have a companion free YouTube video that's a documentary on this that people can watch if they go to waronhumans.com, and it's a 30-minute, it's free on YouTube. They can take a look and see what we're talking about. And my books, which are on the War on Humans books, are on Kindle and Nook. And one of the things this is my first ebook. Usually I write hardcover books, but one of the things that I found really helpful in terms of this ebook is like when I mention that there's a commercial out there called No Pressure to support an anti-global warming initiative, and that this commercial literally blows children up who refuse to accept global warming in a very vivid and graphic and bloody way, people can say, well, is that true? But there's a link in the ebook. It'll take them on their e-reader to the website where they can see the commercial themselves. So for me, this is really an interesting experiment, because rather than just footnotes and describing, people can see for themselves. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I think if people wake up to what's happening and then their antennae are up for the anti-humanism, and when somebody says, oh, human beings are cancer on the planet, you can say, we're not cancers. We're the only species that have duties. We're the only ones who look to engage in responsible environmentalism. Look at the tremendous benefit that has been received by the proper use of resources, and fight back against this. I think it's really important for the children, though, to hear a positive human exceptionalism message, not just in terms of being made in the likeness and image of God. I'm not saying that's not part of it, but also the idea, look, any other species, when a seal washes up on the beach like they do here in California, other species will either eat that injured seal or ignore it and allow it to starve to death. Humans save that seal. There is a difference about human beings that is we should teach our children, that is not only in terms of we have unique value, but also that we have to fulfill our human responsibilities, our duties to ourselves, our duties to our posterity, our duties to treat animals humanely and properly, and our duties to treat the environment in a responsible manner. That's a positive message that can lead to to prosperity, as well as reasonable environmental practices, a clean planet, and so forth. The target number one of the environmental movement right now is the Alberta Tar Sands, which has the potential to bring so much energy to the world and kind of wean us off of the Middle Eastern oil and heat our homes and fuel our transportation and so forth. They're trying to close that down. There's an environmental activist agenda item called ecocide. Ecocide seeks to criminalize as a felony akin to genocide, which shows you again in anti-humanism. The idea that mining copper is the same thing as Auschwitz is really disturbing. And let me read you the definition of ecocide. Ecocide is the extensive destruction, damage to, or loss of ecosystems of a given territory. The territory isn't defined, by the way. It could be a field. Whether by human agency or other causes, to the extent that peaceful enjoyment by the inhabitants of that territory has been severely diminished. guess what? Inhabitants doesn't mean people. It means the trees, it means the snails, it means the lizards, it means the birds. Therefore, you see an elevation of flora and fauna to the same level as human beings. And the target that they're after most to prevent is the Alberta Tar Sands. They've had a mock trial in the English Supreme Court to show you how far this has come, where they found two fictional CEOs of the Alberta Tar Sand oil companies guilty of ecocide and jailed for extracting oil from the land. That's where this is heading. The media doesn't cover it because the media wants to convince everybody that global warming is real, and the media thinks that if you stand up for human exceptionalism, you're some kind of a dinosaur. But human exceptionalism is essential for freedom, for dignity, for liberty, and prosperity. And when people realize that this attack is on, I think they'll stand up and say, we're not going to go down this route.
All right. Just in the brief time that we have, is it your experience that some of this, you talked about teaching our children, is any of this being taught as a curriculum in our schools, from what you know?
Anecdotally is all I can say. I haven't done a study of the approved curricula, but realize a lot of times things are done in school that are not necessarily approved. This is an anecdote. I have a friend who has a granddaughter, and they were driving in the Sierra Mountains. She's about 3. And they pulled over into a restaurant because they were going to get a bite to eat, and they saw a digger digging in the earth. And the little girl got very upset. She said, "Don't let them hurt the earth, Grandpa. Don't let them hurt the earth." And he looked at her and he said, "Honey, where did you get that idea?" And she got it in her Episcopalian nursery school. Wow. So, I mean, this is very serious stuff, and I think people need to be aware and just pay attention, and you might find out there are things going on you didn't expect.
Yeah. Well, this, we have only talked about the iceberg. We've just hit a little bit on this. I appreciate your explaining some of the things you're seeing. To see some of the details, that you mentioned YouTube videos, if they go to waronhumans.com, what is it that they'll see there?
They'll see, first off, a link to the documentary that's free, the YouTube documentary, 30 minutes, based on the book. There's some things in the documentary that I don't have in the book, and there are things in the book that are not in the documentary, but that's produced by the Discovery Institute. And then there are links to the Kindle and Nook version of the ebook. It's $1.99. We want to alert people that this is happening so that we can maintain a society that is prosperous and free.
All right. Now, the books that you have written and the blog on National Review Online, is this something is National Review something you have to pay for now? Or can they see that for free?
No, yeah. You go to nationalreview.com and you look at they have a blog list. I write the Human Exceptionalism blog, and I try to connect the dots between things like euthanasia in Belgium, where they are literally now coupling euthanasia with organ harvesting, where they've just legalized euthanasia for children. And in that law, children have to write a letter saying, "Please kill me." It's amazingly cruel.
Wow.
To the animal rights problems, to the nature rights issues. And I'm trying to show that these things seem to be different issues, and on a certain level they are, but over above, there's an overarching connection of anti-humanism that links them all, and I think it's a sign of the times. And I'm hoping to let people see, listen, there's more of us than of them, but we have to be aware of what's going on and can't just roll our eyes and say, oh, it can't happen here. Anybody who says it can't happen here has been asleep for 50 years.
Wow, fascinating. Our guest has been Wesley Smith. Thanks for being with us. Again, a senior fellow with the Discovery Institute, author of several books, including A Rat is a Pig, Is a Dog is a Boy, The Human Cost of the Animal Rights Movement, also The Consumer's Guide to a Brave New World, and Culture of Death, The Assault on Medical Ethics in America. Thanks very much for being with us.
I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. And stay tuned. We've got more coming up on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. Compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. I have a question for you. What do you know about fracking? Now, that's okay. If you can't define it, you probably haven't wanted to show what you thought or didn't think of it when you saw it on the news. Well, we're going to find out about fracking so that you'll be the smartest person in the room next time the discussion comes up. And I'm sure it will sometime during that 7-minute lull in a conversation. With us is Karen Moreau. She's the executive director of the New York State Petroleum Council, which is part of the American Petroleum Institute. Hey, thanks for being with us, Karen.
Great to be with you.
All right. I have, this isn't the deepest question in the world, but let me ask you, how did we get the word fracking to begin with?
Well, I'm not sure how it evolved. I mean, it refers to a long-time technology called hydraulic fracturing. I don't know who invented the word fracking, but it actually doesn't sound like a very good thing.
Well, I'm fascinated to hear you say that, because we thought, let's see, from a public relations standpoint, would they have gone back and changed the word? I don't know. It does grab your attention, so maybe it actually is a very good word as far as just for that kind of a PR thing. Let me ask you, when somebody wants to know just what is fracking, what do you tell them?
Well, it's hard to explain in a few short sentences, but generally what it is, it's called hydraulic fracturing. And what it is involves the injection, if you will, of water and primarily sand, so 99% water and sand solution, deep under the ground through a well bore. And it's done at high pressure, so you're pushing all this water and sand, and typically you have about 3 chemical additives in that mixture. And the reason for those chemicals is to reduce the friction as that solution is going down deep into the ground, and to also kill some of the bacteria that exists about a mile under the ground in the well pipe. So, and when you push all of this water and sand down there into this horizontal well bore, which has already actually been perforated with tiny holes, it pushes through the holes and into the hard rock formation, and it cracks open the rock. That's the fracturing. And the sand, which is in tiny granules that pushes into these little cracks, actually holds the cracks open. And that allows gas or oil to flow through the cracks into the well pipe and then become pumped up through the vertical well bore and out into the distribution system.
Okay, so fracking can be used either for oil or for natural gas extraction. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And what is really new isn't so much the fracking, because fracking's been going on in this country for over 60 years. Over 1 million wells have been fracked without a single incident of groundwater contamination. And again, that's not me talking. That's Obama's EPA administrator, formerly Lisa Jackson. That's present administrator Gina McCarthy. But bottom line is, what has made this shale gas and oil revolution possible is the combination of horizontal drilling with hydraulic fracturing. And that's why we are now able to reach hard shale formations over a mile under the ground and identify where these formations are and economically extract the oil and gas, to the point where today almost 70% of the oil and gas produced in this country is done using this type of technology of fracking with horizontal drilling.
Okay, so it's not something new. We've been doing it for a long time, and yet I have a feeling that the opponents of it are saying this is not a good thing, almost giving the idea that it's a new concept that hasn't been proven. But you're saying it actually has.
It actually has. And again, it's also highly regulated. It's been regulated for many years by the states, and actually certain aspects of energy development are also regulated by the federal government. What is, I think, made the difference and why it's been much more in the forefront among the media and the public is because we are now seeing much more development potential in places we didn't see it before. For example, Pennsylvania in the Northeast and New York, where I'm from, are states where we have actually had a history of oil and gas development, but nowhere near at the level of the western states or Texas or Oklahoma, for example. So because we're now able to produce this in these deep shale formations in places like upstate New York and in northern Pennsylvania, the places where people never really thought about it before, it's happening or it could be happening. And so I think that's why the public is thinking this is something new. So when you actually go on well sites, and I've toured a number of drilling and fracking operations in northeast Pennsylvania, and I talked to guys that have been doing this for 25, 30 years, they're very bewildered at what all the fuss is about. Because it's not new to them.
So it's because it's becoming more popular that now this campaign of concern, I guess you'd say, has been raised.
Right. So I guess on one level, it's a campaign of concern because it's something people just are not familiar with. But also, and you asked me originally the word fracking, where did it come from? Well, I can tell you, it didn't come from the energy industry. It came from people who are opposed to fracking. And, there's so much that goes into development of language and words. So the sense that it doesn't sound very good, it's, there's a reason for that. And the reason is that there are those in this country who are, for one reason or another, opposed to fossil fuel development. And they have identified fracking as a way to scare people and to also, and many of them, again, happen to be environmental groups that raise money from contributors, they've kind of figured out that it's been a really big money maker for them. So it does serve their interest to kind of keep this fear-mongering campaign going. And, it's, call me cynical, but I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, when I hear the word, I don't think of it necessarily as a negative. I mean, I look at it for what it is. I just find it a fascinating word. And I suppose for those who, like yourself, who are looking at it saying, hey, it's a safe thing, if you can champion the word and turn it around to be a positive, then I suppose it can end up being that as well. Let me ask you, the alternative to horizontal drilling, which is fracking, and you mentioned the details of it, is the other alternative more the old style well drilling? You just go top down and keep going down till you find something?
Yes. And when the old style, what we call conventional gas development, conventional oil development, it would involve just a vertical well bore. And sometimes it would involve fracturing, depending on what type of geologic formation you were moving into. But the fact of the matter is, for example, from the surface and from the point of construction of wells, with one deep horizontal well from one location on the surface, say in an area that's the size of a small football field or a football field, we can do what historically, under old ways, would have required 32 wells to do. So we can reduce the actual surface impact and draw the same amount of resource that it would taken us 32 different attempts to do before. So that's where the economics comes in. That's why most of the development you're seeing today is being done using this combination of hydraulic fracturing with horizontal drilling. And so many entrepreneurs actually have gotten involved in the whole process in improving constantly the technologies involved. Everywhere from people who develop the testing equipment, who develop water recycling equipment, because fracking does involve water. And the point is we want to use the water that we're using to frack a well over and over again. So that brings in recycling. And so if you have hundreds of companies now, from little mom and pop operations to the likes of General Electric, GE, heavily involved in the entire testing and water filtration and recycling phase of this business. So it's very complex. In some ways it's complex. In other ways it's very simple. Once you learn about it, you realize it's not that, unusual, if you will. And you apply common sense and some understanding of physics. But the point is that so many jobs, so much opportunity has been created with the shale gas and oil revolution that we're looking at a situation in this country where over 30 states are doing this, where we're finding more discoveries every day in places that can be developed that historically were not. And we're seeing tremendous job creation. Pennsylvania alone, in the last 5 or 6 years, over 240,000 jobs as a result of this energy revolution.
Wow, that's great. I hate to say it, but we've only hit the surface of fracking, no pun intended. Karen, thank you for being with us. Maybe we can have you back to talk more in depth about this. Appreciate you letting us know. I think this is a good start to the whole discussion. And I suppose if we go to the American Petroleum Institute, we can find out more about this, right?
Yes,
online.
Go to energyfromshale.org.
Energyfromshale.org. Okay. Thanks. Karen Moreau, the Executive Director of the New York State Petroleum Council, is with us, for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll have more coming up on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. We have a guest in studio who is also going to be at the Smullen Center this week that we want to tell you about. And we're talking about hospice and hospice care. And our guest with us is Mary Landberg. She's with the Asante Hospice, and she's an RN and also a photographer. Right?
Yes, I am.
That's quite a unique combination right there. Let me just mention that you're going to be at the Smullen Center this Thursday, and the topic is Conversations with the Dying for the Living. I want to hear more about what it is that you're going to be talking about there. Just wanted to mention that this weekend, I just happened to bump into a person who was saying that their brother was now in a hospice and was expected to die soon. And, the life not only of the hospice person, but the people surrounding that particular individual during that period very quickly can really turn upside down, can it?
It certainly can. And I've participated in the care of hundreds of dying people here in the Rogue Valley. I see death a lot. I know what happens. And I know what to expect when people are going to die from Alzheimer's, heart disease, lung disease, cancer, stroke, and old age. And
are those the main ones that you see in hospice?
Actually, yes.
And this is an area where there are more retired people. It's an aging population, so we could be seeing more of this. Not just that it's older people, but I suppose it ends up being the majority, isn't it?
Yes, and I have created this presentation to answer the question, what is it like to die?
Wow.
And in my presentation, I'm very frank, and I give honest information about what to expect head to toe, emotionally and physically, in the last months, weeks, hours, days, and moments before death.
And is this from the perspective of the person in hospice or the people surrounding that person?
Both. From my perspective, my insights, also, the dying's perspective and their caregivers, family, and friends.
Well, okay, since this has to be something that you've had to think how you're going to process all of this too, because you've been doing this how long now?
I've been with Asante for 7 or 8 years.
In the hospice area? Wow. So you have seen a lot of this. It took you a while, did it, to kind of adapt to all of this, from being a registered nurse to actually being a registered nurse dealing with those people? Was that a difficult transition?
Well, it wasn't actually. I was pretty surprised how comfortable I was with end-of-life care. I'm a better person for spending time with the dying. I have grown immensely from having deep conversations with the dying and their families.
Well, tell me what you've learned.
Well, I learned about
Just think about yourself, 7 years ago when you first started working in hospice to now. What has taken place? Because you're seeing a lot of commonalities. What actually has been the outcome of all of this for you?
Like I said, I'm a better person.
Meaning what? Like what?
Well, my faith in human connection is restored on a constant basis. I see people sharing their unconditional love. It just moves me to do the same. Is to be more of a giving person and be present.
And that's a key thing for family members who may be wondering, how do I even approach this? If I stay away, maybe that's one way of doing it. But you're saying, no, immerse yourself in it?
Well, one of the most gratifying parts of my job as a hospice nurse is when, like, for instance, when I walk into the door for the first time, it becomes real, and I'm often met with people who are emotionally distraught, spinning around and bumping into each other with a deer in the headlights looks on their faces. Their shoulders are hiked up to here. They're not even exhaling. They're worried and afraid and in fear. And so I have the families gather, usually around the bed where the dying person is living, and I tell them everything. I tell them what's happening in that moment and what to expect in the next months, weeks, hours, days, or moments of life. And when this process of death and dying is no longer a scary mystery, people can get to what matters most, and I think that's love and connection.
I would imagine that that's got to be a huge shock to hear somebody like yourself talking about the person who they've loved in that way. I mean, they've got how they process that information is something they probably have never done before, I would assume, right?
For a lot of people, believe it or not, the hospice referral is the first introduction to end of life. And as you can imagine, people are scared to death of the process.
Well, we are a society that doesn't really acknowledge death, right? I mean, everyone acts as if it's never going to happen to them. We'll be the ones who are the exception, right? So this is kind of staring the inevitability in the face, isn't it?
Right, and I do touch on that in my presentation on Thursday at the Coho, as in why are people reluctant to talk about death? Why is it so fearful? Why are people afraid? And basically, it's the fear of the unknown. We're afraid of what we don't know.
Wow. Okay. You know what you have, and we have limited time here, but you've got a book that's coming out in May. Is that right? Okay. It's called Enduring Love. And it's kind of a photography book, right? I mean, kind of, but there's also, you have some real scenarios in there playing out, is that right?
Yeah. Over the last 3 or 4 years, 300 families have allowed me to bring my camera into a most sacred and vulnerable time in their lives. And I strive to photograph that unwavering expression that endures between people who are living with terminal illness. And I've recently written a book. And it has 126 portraits of hospice patients and families embracing love and life. And most of the portraits are of hands and the way people lovingly touch each other. I like to freeze time and to preserve those moments of love and connection that happen between people. And I gift hospice families these portraits. I don't charge for this service.
Now, you have an excerpt, do you, from the upcoming book? Is that right?
Yeah, I have it. Well, there's 126 stories, so I could share a couple with you.
Why don't you kind of give us an idea of what it is that they might find in the book, that you're actually dealing with this every day.
Every day, right? Well, let me just tell you, the book itself offers glimpses into hospice care, the truth about what death and dying looks like, thought-provoking stories about how people live and love with dementia. There are grand love stories in this book, and also conversations with the dying, their advice for living, and the wisdom their illnesses have gifted them. How about that?
Well, that's something that only a family member or somebody like you would actually see as a result. So you've been able to compile this together.
Yes, and the book will be, and my presentation on Thursday will be mostly from this book, stories from the book, and also photographs. I'll be sharing about 40 photographs. All
right, let me just mention again that Mary Landberg, hospice RN and photographer, it's an unusual combination, but it works. She will be at the Smullen Center on February 27th, Conversations with the Dying for the Living. And the book is called Enduring Love. subtitled Inspiring Stories of Love and Wisdom at the End of Life.
Right.
And that'll be in May, right?
May 14th
Okay.
is the big release.
So the big thing is to let you know about this Thursday's event on the 27th. You're going to be talking about a whole lot of things, of course, Thursday. What are the questions that family members might have that you find being repeated when they discover that somebody has to be in hospice and probably won't return home?
The biggest question I hear, the most frequent question I hear is, when is my mother going to die? And my answer can trigger a phone tree that can put people on airplanes all over the country.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah.
My answer can shift priorities dramatically. People give notice to their employers and they just drop everything and they get in their cars and they come.
Yeah.
So I better be right?
Yeah.
Well, not everybody follows the textbook. So if I'm wrong, it's never a bad idea to come visit your loved ones.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a window that's available, and you're the one to let them know about that.
Yeah, and
aren't you?
I will talk about the predictable decline that happens.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you said that you have the family members around the bed, perhaps, of the person who is dying, and you've had a relationship with that patient already, and now the family members are there, and you're being very candid about this. You probably already talked to the patient about it, but there's got to be some sense for that patient laying there to hear all of this with their family that has to be unusual as well. I mean, because normally people don't talk like that. We think of doctors as not really telling everything that they know, and yet you're laying it all out there, aren't you? How is that for the patient? Have they talked to you after that meeting and said what that meant to them?
Yeah, they certainly appreciate it. But here's a problem, is that we're getting hospice admission referrals in the last 3 to 7 days of people's lives.
Oh,
where
really?
the patient is unconscious.
Oh,
and
okay.
what's happening is hospice is more of a crisis management and urgent advocacy for patients. We can't just establish relationships with them. We can't offer our amazing resources with them or help prepare them on their journey. So part of my presentation is we need to get people informed about hospice sooner.
Right,
we also need to help inform people on advanced care planning so that their families aren't having to make these critical decisions in these very stressful environments.
Oh, you can imagine, 3 to 7 days. I mean, hospice wasn't designed to be that last moment, was it? Wasn't it supposed to be some period of time that I would say, I don't know, months, weeks?
Well, to qualify for hospice, a physician must determine that a patient has a terminal illness and that they'll probably die within 6 months if their illness progresses on its normal course.
Oh, but so many factors come into play.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to mention this. We've just hit on the surface of this, but Mary will be talking a lot more about the whole aspect of hospice. It'll be Thursday, February 27th at the Smullen Center, Conversations with the Dying for the Living, and her book is coming out. Will you also have some pictures you'll be bringing with you at the Smullen Center?
That'll be my slide presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, about 40 of them.
Book is called Enduring Love, and look forward to seeing that. When you get that published, I want to see what that looks like.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. Again, that's Thursday, February 27th at the Smullen Center. If you need any more information, just call us here at the Dove. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It was
Appreciate
great to be here.
Thanks for joining us for Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.